Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are undertaking a massive, data-driven investigation into something literally everyone is talking about, but very few people actually understand. We're talking about the Bengaluru residential property market in mid-2026. We are going to peel back the layers and see what is really happening beneath the surface.
Look, there is a profound disconnect in the market right now. The mainstream hype, the stuff heavily fueled by institutional brokerages and developer-funded reports, it tells a story of uninterrupted upward momentum and record sales. It paints this picture of a post-pandemic frenzy that basically never ended. But the forensic reality? It tells a totally different story. When we actually examine independent financial data and real transaction closures, we see a market undergoing an aggressive recalibration. We're looking at financially constrained buyers, tightening regulations, and a decidedly cautious environment.
So here's our roadmap to get to the bottom of this. We'll be covering the real estate illusion, the bid-ask reality, unmasking liquidity traps, the broken math, the IT salary slowdown, and finally, the phantom inventory. Let's dive right in. Okay, Section 1, the real estate illusion, finding the absolute source of truth. For this explainer, we are completely tossing out the highly curated sales reports from Tier 1 developers. Why? Well, because they focus exclusively on new launches, which totally masks the underlying friction in the market. To find the actual truth, we absolutely must focus strictly on the secondary or resale market in major tech corridors, places like Whitefield, the Outer Ring Road, and Electronic City. The resale market is literally the only place to observe true clearing prices, completely stripped of developer payment schemes and artificial price anchoring. It's where real buyers meet real sellers.
Moving to Section 2, the bid-ask reality. This is where seller psychology violently clashes with buyer discipline. Sellers right now are suffering from a major case of the endowments effect. They're artificially inflating their listing prices by 20 to 30%, basically just to leave room for negotiation. But 2026 buyers, they are highly educated. They know the exact prevailing per square foot rates. When a property is aggressively overpriced, buyers simply bypass it. Zero visits, zero inquiries, and when a sale finally does happen, the reality is stark. Tier 1 branded properties see a modest 5 to 8% discount from the asking price, sure, but unbranded, standalone properties are being forced into extreme discounts of 15 to 25% just to get a signature on the dotted line.
Now, a huge driver of these steep negotiations is an inflexible, totally unrecoverable statutory burden, 7.6%. That is exactly what's required to register a property in Bengaluru's urban limits as of 2026. The government basically doubled the registration fee recently. So when you combine the 5% stamp duty, the 10% cess, the 2% urban surcharge, and that 2% registration fee, bam, you hit that 7.6% wall. The practical, everyday impact of this tax is brutal, because this massive 7.6% burden represents upfront capital that banks simply won't fully finance. It completely drains a buyer's immediate liquidity. Think about it. If a seller is demanding a base price of 1.5 crore rupees, the buyer is suddenly forced to cough up an additional 11.4 lakhs in pure taxation just to close the deal. Buyers are using this harsh reality as leverage. They are aggressively negotiating the seller's base price downward just to protect their own cash reserves. Right. Section 3. Unmasking liquidity traps. Let's look at the days-on-market divide. Remember the 2022 peak when basically everything sold in 30 days? Yeah, the mid-2026 reality is vastly different. A standard 2 BHK from a Tier 1, reputed builder with clean documentation still clears relatively fast, usually in about 45 days. But unbranded Tier 2 inventory? That's a different story. A 2 BHK sits for an average of 135 days, and a standalone 3 BHK languishes for 180 days or more. Liquidity right now is highly conditional. So what's causing this stagnation? Well, it boils down to what we call exit killers. These are specific physical flaws that today's selective buyers are heavily penalizing. If you have a ground floor unit, get ready to take an immediate 15 to 20% discount because of privacy and security concerns. What about south-facing units? The data shows Vastu compliance barriers instantly eliminate 70% of your potential buyer pool right out of the gate. Turns out, bad energy is pretty bad for liquidity. And if you're in an aging society with fewer than 100 units, buyers are actively avoiding you because of the lack of maintenance funds. If you hold an asset with these exit killers, your liquidity is effectively zero unless you absolutely slash your price. Okay, on to Section 4, the broken math, yield versus cost of capital. Let's pose a super relatable real-world scenario.
Does buying a 2.5 crore rupee apartment in a premium corridor like Whitefield using a standard home loan actually make financial sense right now? Let's take all emotion out of it and break down the brutal math.
If you rent that 2.5 crore flat, you're paying about 60,000 rupees a month, and that includes maintenance. But if you buy it, with an 80% loan at an 8.5% interest rate, your EMI alone is a staggering 1,73,000 rupees. Add in maintenance and tax reserves, and your monthly outflow jumps to 1,83,000 rupees. Which leaves an investor with this absolutely shocking number, a monthly cash flow deficit of $1 million and 23,000 rupees. That is your out-of-pocket shortfall every single month. By choosing to rent, you preserve that 1.23 lakhs a month, plus your massive initial down payment, which you could be compounding in other financial instruments. The math here is literally undeniable. To understand exactly why the math is structurally broken, we have to look at yields. People love to talk about gross rental yields of 3.5 to 4.5%, but honestly, that's an illusion. Once you deduct mandatory maintenance, property taxes, those inevitable vacancy periods, and income tax, your actual net yield drops to somewhere between 2.5 and 3.0%. When your net income is 2.8% and your home loan costs you 8.5%, you have a severe negative carry. The conclusion? Purchasing highly leveraged property in Bengaluru right now is strictly viable only for end users seeking psychological stability or all-cash buyers. For an investor relying on debt, it simply does not work.
Section 5. The IT salary slowdown. A massive macroeconomic headwind.
Historically, booming IT hiring meant a booming property market, right? Well, that paradigm has totally fractured. The prevailing narrative that IT salaries are just constantly rising is actually false. Global data shows the median pay for engineering professionals in India actually contracted, dropping from $36,000 down to $22,000 as companies ruthlessly optimized costs. Meanwhile, between 2023 and 2025, property prices in premium corridors surged by over 40%. We are looking at a severe affordability crisis. Mid-level IT workers are now mathematically priced out of those premium corridors. And on top of that, the very nature of employment is shifting. The tech sector is moving heavily toward hybrid and contract labor. Contract workers now make up 30 to 40% of the labor pool. Why does this matter for real estate? Well, because mainstream lenders heavily prefer stable, full-time employee income for loan underwriting. This massive shift to gig and contract work is disrupting home financing, causing widespread friction and rejections in the loan approval process, which ultimately slows down the entire property market. Finally, Section 6, Phantom Inventory and Regulatory Paralysis. To understand this last piece of the puzzle, we have to talk about the state's aggressive push for digital compliance, specifically the e-Khata mandate and the Kaveri 2.0 system. A verified digital e-Khata is now absolutely mandatory for any property registration or ownership transfer. Now, on the surface, this is great for transparency. But in reality, it has completely paralyzed tens of thousands of ready-to-move-in apartments built by smaller developers who deviated from their sanctioned building plans. The immediate fallout from this mandate is wild. Sub-registrars have completely frozen legacy paper B-Khata transfers. Banks have enacted total financing blackouts for properties lacking a final e-Khata, meaning these sellers have to go out and find rare all-cash buyers. Plus, the government is cracking down hard, canceling 54,000 fraudulent A-Khatas. And sure, there is a BUMA guarantee regularization window, but that closes on August 23, 2026, and properties with severe structural deviations don't even qualify for it anyway. This creates a massive phantom supply. Tens of thousands of units exist physically, but they are legally frozen and cannot be sold. This artificial constraint on supply is exactly what allows Tier 1 builders to maintain their premium pricing power. Wow, okay, we've covered a ton of ground today, peeling back the hype to look at the undeniable data. The core takeaway from our forensic analysis is crystal clear. The Bengaluru market requires meticulous due diligence, a profound respect for legal documentation, and an acceptance that capital appreciation will no longer mask poor asset selection. The days of blind, indiscriminate buying and guaranteed returns, they are over. Extreme selectivity is the new law of the land. Which leaves us with a final provocative thought. Think about the facts we've uncovered today. That crushing 7.6% registration tax, the stagnant liquidity of non-premium assets,
the structurally broken math of leveraged yields, the tightening IT belts, and the regulatory chokehold creating all this phantom inventory. Knowing this forensic reality, I have to ask you, is the era of easy speculative capital appreciation in real estate gone forever? I highly encourage you to use the insights from this explainer to rigorously reevaluate your own financial strategies. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. Keep learning, keep asking the hard questions, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.